I'd like to ask, is Auditor Lee on the call? Because I don't see you up there yet. Don't hear from her.
She was having some issues logging in, so I'm trying to work with her to get her in.
Okay, all right, thank you. How about Keith Konechny?
I have not seen Keith.
Beg pardon?
Excuse me. My understanding is that Mr. Konechny had a conflict and will not be joining us today. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. And how about Cale Turner? Oh, there's Cale. I see him. Welcome, Cale.
Yes, sir. Morning.
Thank you. So I see a quorum, and I hereby call the meeting of the State Board of Finance to order. I appreciate you all being able to attend this meeting on short notice. We were asked by the EBD organization, in particular, Mr. Jake Bleed would like to make a presentation and present some scenarios that he sees coming in the future that we need to be aware of. There's a couple of things that we'll be actually voting on. I think the first two items on the agenda will be voting items, and then the rest will be for informational purposes. So what I'd like to do now is turn the meeting over to Jake Lee, who will give us sort of an overview of what we can expect in this meeting this morning, and then he'll move into the substance of what he would like us to know about the immediate future. So Jake, I turn the meeting over to you now.
Thank you. And thank you to members of the board for meeting on an emergency basis. I appreciate your willingness to take some time out on a Friday morning to consider these proposals. And also, I'd like to take advantage of the meeting to get to you and the members of the public up to speed on where we're at with the plan. As you may recall, the legislature and the consultant that they hired had made a series of recommendations on ways that we could improve or the benefits provided to our members, as well as the financial stability of the plan. We're actively implementing those solutions. I think there's some really, really good ideas in there. One of those ideas is presented to you all today in the form of a request for proposal. And that would be to seek bids on a contract for a Medicare Advantage vendor. And we can go into a little more detail on what that is and why we're doing that now on an emergency basis. The other is a contract for a pharmacy benefits manager. Now, we've had a PBM, a pharmacy benefit manager, for years. They're very kind of standard for insurance companies and self-funded plans like ours. There are going to be some changes, though, that the consultants, the Siegel Group, have implemented or are recommending for us to implement, which we think could help the plan out in the future. The reason that we've brought this to you today and not held them until your next meeting, which is in April, is because both contracts are to be put out for bid, solicited and procured, and then implemented before an effective date of January 1, 2023. Because that's only 9 months away and we are rapidly running out of calendar year 2022, we felt it best to bring these items to your attention now. Under the law, the Board of Finance has a responsibility for the development of RFPs. We wanted to make you aware and get your approval on moving forward with these items. With your approval, we will then put RFPs out on the street for bid. Those bids will be collected. Vendors who are interested in the business will submit proposals. Those proposals will be scored according to the criteria that the state uses for its procurement processes. The scores will lead to the highest vendor then getting a chance to negotiate a final contract. So the highest score will come in, we'll negotiate a final contract, and then we'll come back to you all probably in June or July with a final deal. And we'll have an opportunity to review the details of that, the implications of it, and how we anticipate it rolling out. Assuming that you all approve at that meeting, it would then go to the Arkansas Legislative Council for final approval, and implementation will hopefully begin in July. For the For the Medicare Advantage plan and the pharmacy benefits manager, both are somewhat complicated procurements. They're going to require a fair amount of implementation and rollout. So time is of the essence, and we really felt it best to go ahead and get your approval on it now so that we can spend the next couple of weeks getting the RFPs out on the street, getting proposals back, and really giving the vendors time to inform our members of how these changes are going to affect their benefits. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of concern about these, particularly the Medicare Advantage plan. And I think the more time we spend educating our members and giving them the options and the decisions they need, the better off we'll all be. I've sent out with the materials a description of what the Medicare Advantage plan does, as well as the pharmacy benefits manager plans. Those are both issues that I think we've had a chance to discuss here at the board. More than happy to go into that in more detail. But at this point, I'd like to stop and ask if there are any questions or if there's any interest in discussing a little more on how these things might work. I'm more than happy to go into it. This is something we've been working on for a while. As you know, the consultants for the legislature, this has been a subject that has been discussed in great deal before the Arkansas Legislative Council. And it's an issue that I think that we can't talk about enough in a lot of ways, just because I do think there is some complexity there. There are obviously a lot of questions, but there's a lot of advantages and benefits. And I think the more educated we can all get on it, the better off we'll be.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Auditor Lee.
Thank you.
Please.
Jake, yes, as a board member, I've gotten questions, but I'm sure you've gotten a lot more. What are the top 3 concerns?
Sure.
If you would go over those, I'd appreciate it.
So the big concerns, as I understand them, and my understanding is the members of the General Assembly, a lot of us have gotten questions about them. But what I've heard is, one, Medicare Advantage plans aren't very good, that they don't provide good coverage, that there's a lot of hidden costs built into them. And so one of the challenges that we've got is distinguishing between what we're doing, which is a self-funded plan that will be designed specifically for our members, and the 200 plus other Medicare Advantage plans that are on the market today. One of the advantages of the Medicare Advantage program is that there's lots of flexibility there. There's a lot of opportunity to create specific programs that meet the specific needs of specific employer groups. But that advantage is also a disadvantage because in all that complex and all that flexibility, there can be a lot of complications, and there could be a lot of Medicare Advantage plans that are not good options for our members. So one of the things that we've really tried to emphasize is this is not going to be like the Medicare Advantage plans you might see advertised on TV. This is going to be a separate Medicare Advantage plan designed specifically for state and public school retirees. When we draft the RFP as a starting point, we're going to take our current level of coverage and basically say, this is the bottom, okay? Any coverage that you provide, this is the minimum. We'd really like to see how much better you can do. So that's the first thing. The other thing is network questions. You know, my doctor doesn't take Medicare. My doctor doesn't take Medicare Advantage. One of the things that we're doing and we've definitely heard that a lot. And so in drafting the RFP, one of the things we're looking at is making sure that we have a broad PPO style network, that we have as few disruptions as possible for our members who do enroll in the Medicare Advantage plan, who don't exercise the option to opt out, which they will have, to keep their current benefits. We really want to make sure that we don't have disruption on our members and that they can still go see the doctor or the pharmacist or the hospital that they're used to seeing. Those are really the big ones. But I think there's also just a lot of skepticism out there about the claim that a Medicare Advantage plan will save the money. I think that there's a lot of skepticism, very understandable, that maybe this is too good to be true. You know, how do you have the same level of benefits but pay less and get more? And the answer to that has to do with how the Medicare program is structured, the Medicare Advantage process. And the reality is that the federal government has made this a very lucrative proposition for states, large employers and for insurance companies. So there's a lot of opportunity there for us and for the members to see better benefits, potentially at less cost, as a result of the generosity, frankly, of the federal government. Have you heard something differently, or are there
No,
other
that's,
questions?
that basically, yeah, the concern is too good to be true. Will we get to keep our doctor? Those are the biggest concerns I've heard. So, Mr. Chairman, if I didn't know if anyone else raised their hand, I have a follow-up question.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So the proposals are going to come into you. What is the board going to see? Is the board going to be able to see all of the proposals, or will the board only see the one you submit after you've scored them all?
So this is one of the questions that we had internally, is how do you do a competitive solicitation in a public meeting? Because of course, procurement processes are very competitive. In fact, that's by design. We want them to be as competitive as possible. But for that reason, it's important to be able to draft those and score those outside of a meeting where you might have members of the public who work for those vendors and who might have an opportunity to either influence the process or claim that somebody else has influenced the process. So our plan going forward is to go ahead and score them. We have or are working through the process of developing those RFPs. We'll have people who know what pharmacy benefit operations look like, who know what Medicare Advantage plans look like, who would be able to say, this is a good proposal, this is a bad proposal, score them according to state law, and then we'll bring those final results to you all, as well as with the contract.
Will you have access to all the bids?
Yeah, all of that will be public information once we're completed.
Thank you.
Jake, this is Representative Ferguson. I'm sorry, I couldn't find a raise hand function. I guess, you know, and I've talked to you about this, my main concern is because we're a border city and all of our healthcare is in Memphis. I just want to make sure that adequate provider network includes out-of-state providers in our border cities. And also, I guess the other thing I hear patients concerned about is, or teachers, is if they go to this, what are they losing that they have in Medicare now in terms of skilled nursing days and, you know, all of the things that Medicare has, what will be lost with the Medicare Advantage plan?
So on the nationwide contract, one of the things that we are looking at, and this is a recommendation of the consultants, is that we have a nationwide PPO plan. We're really limiting the RFP process to large companies who have nationwide networks, who have a track record of doing this well in other states. CMS, the way that the Medicare Advantage plan is structured, is they really provide a lot of financial incentives for these companies to do it right, to do it on a broad basis. So yeah, I agree. If we have folks who are used to going across state lines to get their healthcare, we want them to continue to be able to do that. One of the things that we've talked about doing is making sure that when we do ultimately succeed in getting a contract put out and we have a Medicare Advantage plan in place, that we have a very careful and detailed analysis on how that will differ from the current benefits. And we want every member to be able to make a smart and informed decision. So it's entirely possible that folks may not like the Medicare Advantage plan. They may want to stick with what they've got because they feel like their doctor won't come over to the MA plan. That's fine. We want them to make that decision and to be aware of those impacts. The reality is, if we don't do it right, the program won't succeed. And the people going through that decision-making process will come to the conclusion that it's not right for them. So we have every reason to really want to be responsive to those concerns and make sure they have a good, broad network and they get the same level of care they're used to.
Are there any more questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Commissioner Marshall. Please.
Jake, thank you, sir. Jake, and we may have been told this before in previous meetings, but is the Medicare Advantage program model, how common is that among neighboring states or across the country as a whole? Can you speak to that? Not necessarily an exact percentage, but just the familiarity and the applicability of it.
So I don't know about our surrounding states, but I do know that nationwide, it's very common. That was one of the first things that the consultant said was, this is something that I want to say something like 37 other states currently offer. Like I said earlier, it's a program that the federal government has really structured to be a very, very beneficial program for large employers like states and school districts, and also for members.
Okay,
So
so
it's very common.
it may be that we are late, we would be a late adopter at this point if,
Yeah, it's a program that's evolving just like healthcare is. But the good news for us is we've been able to provide pretty good benefits for our retirees under traditional Medicare. This is just another option that might make it even better and less expensive for the retirees.
excellent, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, please. Go ahead.
Jake, on the PBM, on the requirement to return 100% of the rebates, is there any fear that being a condition at the very beginning keeps some otherwise qualified vendors who could provide better service or more efficient service, that keeps them from even bidding if that's a non-negotiable thing from the start?
That's a big question. And, the last time we did this back in 2016, we did not have all the big companies participating. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but one of the arguments was, well, that's because we insisted on 100% rebates. Working with the consultants, though, 100% rebate transparency is a standard request for contracts of this size. It's not unusual. The reality also in working with our pharmacy guys, and there's been a lot of discussion about rebates and how much we can get and how much we should be getting. What we're really focusing on is a bottom line cost. And so, rebating is part of the process. It's part of the role, and we're looking at how we can maximize the amount of rebates we get. But the reality also is these are our dollars. These are our people, our lives, who are taking this medicine, and we really need to know what dollars are attached to those decisions. And so that's why we really want that 100% rebating there. I would like to know, and I think our members would like to know, how the tax dollars are being used, or at least what is driving the decision to spend those dollars. But that's definitely something we'll be looking at, and we can talk more about that when we get a little closer to talking about a final contract.
Do we have, sorry, Mr. Chairman, one more.
Any additional questions? Do you have
One
some
more,
more
Mr.
questions?
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Hey, Jake, do we have any, to that point, do we have any idea of how many proposals we may get back?
On the PBM side?
Either, I guess.
Well, the PBM side is a pretty, I think it'd be an oligopoly, maybe. There's 3 big firms that cover about, I want to say 80–90% of the market. We'll obviously be hoping to get solicitations from all 3. There's really no reason why they wouldn't bid on the business. It's a very competitive market between those 3. After that, there's a lot of them out there. Obviously, what we don't want to do is have 1 or 2 bids. We want 8 or 9. We want it to be a very competitive solicitation. And so that's one of the things that we're working on. How can we make that happen?
Dale, do you have any other questions?
No, sir.
Are there any other questions from the board? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the recommendation by EBD to move forward with the RFP for Medicare Advantage.
Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Eric Munson, second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to have a motion for the pharmacy benefit manager. Again, the recommendation that has been put forth by EBD. May I have a motion for that?
Alan McLean, I motion.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. A second, please?
Second, I'm sorry, Eric Munson, second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that issue? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Jake, you have our approval to move forward on those two solicitations for the proposal. Now I'd like to, Jake, I'd like for you to discuss your request or your the next agenda item, which talks about the existing contracts and the extension of those.
Sure. When we had originally drafted this agenda, we had a number of contracts which expire on June 30th, and which we were going to bring to you all for approval to extend those for another 12 months or 6 months, depending on the contract. However, we didn't get the renewal letter requests from all of the vendors in time, or the requests we did get sought a rate increase, which we are currently trying to negotiate. So because of that, we are going to hold off on presenting any additional requests to extend contracts until the April meeting coming up in a few more weeks. That will give us some time. The contracts which we will be asking to extend are a contract for Mainstream, which is our IT company, the company that runs the portal AR benefits that handles a lot of our data. Med Impact is our current PBM. Their contract expires June 30th, so we will need to extend that out to the end of the calendar year so that we can complete the RFP we just voted on for a new PBM. Optum, which is a company that provides health savings account and FSAs, and then EBRX, which is the company out of the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, which helps us with our pharmaceutical coverage, our rebate contracting, and our formulary management. So those are all going to come before you all here in April. And there's no action the board needs to take at this time on those.
Are there any questions on those additional contracts that anyone would like to ask at this point? There's no action item. It's just that we'll be seeing those in the near future.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Hearing no questions, then I'd like, I've had a lot of questions in my mind and others about the subcommittees that the new legislation has proposed, or not proposed, has enacted it within Act 114. Would you give us sort of an overview of how that is to work and how many are on it, and what the purposes of those subcommittees are, please?
Sure. So under Act 114, the Board of Finance, of course, was rewarded for its smart and diligent service by taking on responsibilities for EBD full term. To support in that role, the Act created two subcommittees, one for the state employees and one for the public school employees, which I think the idea is those subcommittees, each of which has 5 members, will really do a lot of the heavy lifting and kind of thinking through on the details, then make recommendations to the Board of Finance for final approval. Those 5 members on each of those committees will be made up of 3 people who will be appointed by the governor. Each of those individuals must have at least 5 years experience in finance, banking, or insurance. And then 1 current active employee and 1 retired employee, either from the state or the public schools, to make up the 5 people. Combined, those 5 folks will be expected to help us in our decision-making process. Act 114 has a long list of items that they will be asked to review and consider. Rate changes, changes in funding, changes in benefit plan, changes in vendors, changes in formularies. Pretty much the learning curve for those folks will be pretty steep coming up. The law requires that those subcommittees meet for the first time by July 1, but the reality is we need them to probably get set down and learning a lot earlier than that, because we have a lot to do this year. We have submitted names to the governor. The governor's office, I know, is looking at this as a decision. I'm assuming that the legislature has also submitted their names, and that we will be looking to appoint these subcommittees in the near future, or announcement from the governor to appoint these subcommittees in the near future, so we can go ahead and get them seated and develop the process that we need to figure out going forward on how all of this is going to work. The reality is that we're all going to have to work together. There's going to have to be a lot of communication. We're going to have a lot of Zoom meetings to figure out how we're going to work together to solve some of the significant problems the plan faces. In addition, of course, Commissioner Alan McLean is joining us. Good morning, sir. He is the insurance commissioner, and pursuant to Act 114, he has been assigned the responsibility to join the Board of Finance on EBD specific items. So he will be joining us for those items. And finally, the legislative package also requires quarterly reporting from EBD and the Board of Finance. So we will be providing some quarterly reports to the legislature on the performance of EBD, on all that's going on over here. We'll need to get you all to be aware of those, to provide your input on those reports before they go over. So we have a lot of changes that are going to be occurring for the Board of Finance. I want to first make sure that you all understand that we're here to support you. So if you have any questions, if you're hearing from any folks, or if there's anything we can do to help adjust and conform to this new responsibility, please let us do that. The reality is, I think that we have some really good ideas. We have some great people, not only on the Board of Finance, but I'm hopeful that we'll be appointed to the subcommittees. And I'm excited for some of the opportunities that we have before us.
Are there
I
any
have a question.
questions?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman.
Please, Auditor Lee.
Well, I'll repeat what I said last meeting, which I'll probably repeat from now until the end of the year. All we did was add a layer of bureaucracy, in my opinion. My concern is you use the term, Jake, and I respect that you believe this, that the final decision is made of the board by the Board of Finance, but I just see difficulties. I do think it's wise to have some people who can meet more substantively, and hopefully these committees, you said they have a steep learning curve, can grasp it. But in the end, really, the Board of Finance isn't going to be the one with the final decision. It's going to be the legislature always. So anyway, I just wanted to state my, I don't know, how would I describe what that is? My concern moving forward.
Duly noted.
I think we need to get that on tape so we can repeat it. Are there any other comments or questions? Jay, is there anything else you want to talk about with regard to the budget projections and the future plans that we submitted and provided to the board? Is there anything else you want to talk about on that?
Yes, if I could, I would just like to take advantage of the fact that this is a emergency meeting, just to bring you up to speed a little bit on some of the work that we've done to improve the state of the finances of the Employee Benefits Division. So some of you might remember back in the summer when we saw these charts, and this is what the state employees looked at. You can see the green is our revenue, the yellow is our expenses. In red, that's the deficit that we were looking at. And then of course in gray, those are our assets. And so over the summer, when we were looking at this issue, of course, we saw a declining trend, and obviously calendar year 22 was looking pretty grim. That's for the state employees. Over there on the public school side, it was arguably even worse. We were looking at a $70 million deficit. But because of the actions of the Board of Finance, and as well as the actions of the General Assembly, the Department of Education, and others, we've been able to change that picture significantly. So over here on the state employee side, we're going to end 22 with a slight deficit of 1.2 million and improve to a surplus in 23. 24 and 25 are looking not very good, but we have a number of plans and strategies in place where we can improve that. This surplus number is not exactly where it should be, but as you might recall, on the state employee side, things were not as unstable. I think that we had more options there, and I think we'll have some really good ideas on ways that we can improve this portrait for the state employees. Instead, the focus traditionally has been on the public school side. That's really where the problem's been. And that's where we have some better news, I think, to share. This is the current outlook for public school employees. If you recall from last summer, we were looking at a $70 million deficit for calendar year 22. We have now changed that up to a $6 million surplus for 22, as well as a $30 million surplus projected for 23. You can see these reserve numbers are very, very strong. Those are really good news for us. So I guess I kind of think that because of the board's actions over the summer and the actions of the General Assembly, we've now got a good foundation to begin addressing some of the longer term issues we've got going forward. So I wanted to make the board aware of that. Now, in the April meeting and the meetings coming forward, we have some thoughts on ways that we might need to change the benefit design and change the contribution the state makes to bring us in line with other states. So these numbers are likely to change. But I did want to say on the front end that thanks in large part to the General Assembly and to the Board of Finance, we've been able to stabilize the program. I'll stop there. I have some more numbers to throw at you, but I wanted to see if there are any questions here.
Are there any questions? I don't hear any, Mr. Blade.
So the other thing that we've been working on is a monthly projection spreadsheet for our state and our public school employees. To my knowledge, we have not had this before. This is something new for EBD, but we've been working with our actuaries, the Milliman firm, to develop projections for 22 and 23, and I included those in your numbers there. And here you can see this is where we're at for 22. You can see right here the $35 million that we got from the restricted reserve that came in January. That is a big part of the reason why this has been a successful year, or why things are looking up. What's more, right here, you can see that the amount of funding provided by the Department of Education will increase dramatically in July when the state fiscal year begins. Those two issues combined, that $35 million as well as that $11 million stream of revenue, are really the items that help us stabilize this plan and give us that surplus for the year. I also want to draw your attention to the amount that the PPE funding, this is the funding from the districts, it's about $9 million a month. With the changes the legislature adopted, that number is about 168. It will move up to $300 per member per month. Thanks to the increased state funding, that means that funding is going to go up to 15 million. And that combined with the Department of Education funding is really going to help stabilize our plan. So that is good news for us, but I also wanted to make you aware of this monthly analysis. We'll be presenting this information to you all, as well as what is kind of a budget tracking tool where you can see the projected amounts as we go through the year. These are the amounts, of course, that we'll be budgeting around. And then the actual financials, which will show us how close we were we correct, were we accurate. You'll see membership totals, all the fun nickels and dimes that we need to be tracking to be able to make smart and effective decisions. This is the information I'd like to present to you all going forward, and which we would also be including in our quarterly reports over to the General Assembly. There's no action that needs to be taken. I just wanted to show you some of the work we're doing, and also to say thank you for your work in helping fix some problems we've got in the plan. I think we're off to a good start.
Thank you, Jake, and thanks to TSS too for the good work that y'all are doing over there. This is good news with regard to the public school employees and the state employees. Are there any additional questions that anyone would like to bring before Mr. Bleed or the Board of Finance? Well, I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. Thank you for being here, especially on the short notice. Is there any other business that anyone would like to bring before the Board of Finance at this meeting today? Would note that our next meeting is April the 28th. I think it's a Thursday, about a little over a month away. So seeing no further business to come before the Board of Finance, I declare this meeting to be adjourned. Thank everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.